They called her worthless, a burden. They threw her into the rain like garbage. But when the truth emerged, her children discovered the devastating secret their mother had hidden for 30 years, and nothing would ever be the same. The rain hammered down like bullets from heaven as Margaret Hayes stood on the porch of the house she had paid for with her own blood and sweat, staring at the three faces that had once been her entire world. Her daughter Rachel's eyes were cold as winter steel. Her son Thomas wouldn't even look at her. And Sarah, her baby, the one who used to crawl into her bed after nightmares, was holding the door like Margaret was a stranger trying to break in. "Please," Margaret's voice cracked, rain already soaking through her thin cardigan. "Please just let me explain." "Explain what, Mother?" Rachel's voice dripped with venom that made Margaret's chest constrict. "Explain how you've been living off us like a parasite for years? Explain how you never contributed anything to this family?" The words sliced through Margaret like surgical knives, and she would know. She had once held those knives with steady hands, saving lives while her children slept safely in their beds. "Rachel, that's not fair," Margaret whispered, her hands trembling so violently she had to clasp them together. "I worked 3 jobs to keep this house after your father died. I never asked you for anything until you got old and useless." Thomas finally spoke, his words hitting harder because they came from her son, her boy who she had rocked to sleep every night when he was terrified of the dark. "Face it, Mom, you're just a burden now." Margaret felt her knees weaken. A burden. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. She had been called many things in her life: brilliant, pioneering, gifted, but never a burden. Not until now. Not until the 3 people she had sacrificed everything for looked at her like she was garbage they needed to dispose of. "Do you remember?" Margaret's voice shook. "Do you remember when you had pneumonia, Thomas? When you were 8 years old and the hospital said they couldn't treat you without insurance?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably, but Rachel cut in before he could respond. "Oh my God. Are we really doing this again? The whole 'I sacrificed everything' speech." Rachel rolled her eyes with a cruelty that would have seemed impossible in the little girl who used to make Margaret dandelion crowns. "You did what any mother would do. It doesn't give you the right to leech off us forever." "I'm not leeching." Margaret felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I just need a few more weeks until I can find a place. My Social Security check was delayed and there's always an excuse with you." Sarah spoke for the first time, and her voice carried a bitterness that shattered Margaret's heart into pieces. "The check was delayed. The rent was too high. You need help with medical bills." "When does it end, Mother?" "When I die, apparently," Margaret whispered, and the words came out more broken than she intended. The 3 siblings exchanged glances, and in that moment, Margaret saw something that destroyed her more than all their cruel words combined. Relief. They were relieved at the thought of her death. Her own children, the babies she had nursed and protected and loved with every fiber of her being, would be relieved when she was gone. "Look, we've been patient long enough." Thomas pulled out an envelope from his jacket, and Margaret noticed his hand didn't even shake as he handed it to her like she was a bill collector. "Here's $500. It's more than generous, considering you've contributed nothing to this household for months." $500. Margaret looked at the envelope and wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to tell them that she had once made that in an hour performing heart surgery, that she had walked away from a career that would have made her millions because her children needed her more than operating rooms needed another surgeon. But she said nothing, because they didn't know. They had never known. "The locks will be changed tomorrow morning." Rachel's voice was businesslike now, as if she were terminating an employee rather than discarding her mother. "Don't try to come back. We've already called the police to let them know you might try to cause problems." "Cause problems?" Margaret's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. "This is my house. I bought this house. I paid every mortgage payment for 15 years before you 3 even had jobs. And we've been paying for it ever since you stopped working," Sarah shot back. "That was 7 years ago, Mother. 7 years of us carrying your weight. 7 years ago." Margaret closed her eyes against the memory that crashed over her like the rain, the arthritis diagnosis that had ended her secret night work at the free clinic, the day her hands had finally betrayed her, shaking too much to hold the instruments that had once moved with such precision. You don't understand. Margaret tried one more time, her voice desperate now. There are things about our life, about how I provided for you, that you don't know. Oh, here we go with the mysterious secrets. Rachel laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was like glass cutting through Margaret's soul. What's next, Mother? Are you going to tell us you were secretly rich and just pretended to be a cleaning lady? That you were actually some kind of superhero? The sarcasm in Rachel's voice made it impossible for Margaret to tell them the truth. How could she explain now, standing in the rain being evicted from her own home, that she had indeed been something extraordinary, that she had won awards and saved hundreds of lives, that she had walked away from it all because her husband died, and her babies needed their mother more than the world needed another surgeon? Just go, Mom. Thomas's voice held a finality that crushed what little hope Margaret had left. We're done. We've been done for a long time. We just didn't have the courage to tell you. Margaret looked at each of her children one last time. Rachel with her designer clothes that Margaret's cleaning jobs had paid for when she was in college. Thomas with his expensive watch that she had bought him for his graduation, back when she still had something in savings. Sarah with her perfectly styled hair from the salon Margaret had taken her to every month when she was in high school, using money that should have gone to her own medication. They didn't remember any of it. Or worse, they remembered and simply didn't care. I love you, Margaret whispered, knowing they wouldn't say it back, but needing to say it anyway. I have always loved you more than my own life. That's the problem, isn't it? Rachel's final words fell like an executioner's axe. You never had a life of your own. You just latched onto ours. Now it's time to let go. The door slammed shut. Margaret stood there for a moment that felt like an eternity, staring at the closed door of the house that held 30 years of memories. The kitchen where she had taught them to bake cookies. The living room where they had opened Christmas presents. The bedrooms where she had read them stories every single night, even when she was so exhausted from working that she could barely keep her eyes open. All of it, behind a door that would never open for her again. The rain intensified, soaking through her clothes until she was shivering uncontrollably. Margaret looked down at the envelope in her hands, now wet and crumpled. $500. Less than the cost of the orthodontic work she had paid for Rachel. Less than the car repair she had covered for Thomas when he was too broke to fix it himself. Less than the security deposit she had given Sarah for her first apartment. She started walking. Her feet moved mechanically down the driveway, past the rose bushes she had planted when the children were small, past the mailbox she had painted every few years to keep it looking nice. The neighborhood was dark and empty, everyone safe in their warm houses while she wandered like a ghost through the storm. Where would she go? She had no siblings, no parents left alive. Her friends had drifted away over the years as she poured all her energy into her children and her secret night work at the clinic. She had made herself small, invisible, forgettable, because that's what mothers do. They erase themselves so their children can take up more space in the world. Margaret's chest began to ache. At first, she thought it was just the cold rain and the emotional devastation. But then the pain sharpened, spreading down her left arm like fire through her veins. Her breath came in short gasps. The world tilted. Not now, she whispered to her failing body. Please, not now. But the body doesn't care about timing. It doesn't care about dignity or convenience. Margaret felt her legs give out, and she crumpled onto the rain-soaked sidewalk 3 blocks from the house that had once been her sanctuary. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a pair of headlights cutting through the rain, coming closer. And the last thing she thought was a prayer. Please, let them know the truth. Let them know who I really was. Then everything went black. Inside the house, Rachel poured herself a glass of wine with hands that shook slightly. We did the right thing, she said to Thomas and Sarah, but her voice lacked conviction. She'll be fine, Thomas muttered, staring at his phone to avoid looking at his sisters. She always lands on her feet somehow. But Sarah stood at the window watching the rain, feeling something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. Did you see her face? She whispered. When we said we were done with her? Don't. Rachel's voice turned sharp. Don't start feeling guilty now. We gave her plenty of chances. Did we? Sarah turned from the window, and for the first time in months, she looked at her siblings with something like horror. Or did we just get tired of being inconvenienced? She was bleeding us dry, Thomas insisted, but even he sounded uncertain now. She wasn't contributing anything. She raised us. Sarah's voice cracked. She raised us alone after Dad died. Doesn't that count for something? That was her job, Rachel said firmly, finishing her wine in one gulp. Parents are supposed to raise their children. They don't get a medal for doing the bare minimum. But as the night wore on, and the rain continued to pound against the windows, all three siblings found themselves unable to sleep, unable to shake the image of their mother's face in that last moment before the door closed. They didn't know that their mother was lying unconscious on a sidewalk, her heart failing, her body shutting down from a lifetime of stress and sacrifice they had never even suspected. They didn't know that by tomorrow morning, their entire world would shatter when the truth finally emerged from the shadows where Margaret had kept it hidden for 3 decades. They didn't know that the woman they had called useless, worthless, a burden, was about to be recognized by someone who understood exactly who Margaret Hayes really was, and what she had given up for the children who had just thrown her away like garbage. And they certainly didn't know that their cruelty tonight would echo through their lives in ways that would haunt them forever. A reminder that sometimes we destroy the most precious treasures because we've forgotten how to see value beyond the surface. The rain continued to fall, washing away nothing, forgiving nothing, while Margaret's unconscious form lay in the storm like a broken promise, waiting for salvation or death, whichever came first. Dr. Samuel Peterson had seen death enough times to recognize it approaching. The woman lying on the rain-soaked sidewalk had that particular stillness that meant the body was making its final calculations, fight or surrender. Her lips were blue, her breathing shallow, and her pulse was threading away like water through fingers. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Samuel knelt beside her, shielding her face from the rain with his jacket as he checked vitals, tilted her head to open her airway. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, but his mind was racing. How long had she been lying here? Why was nobody with her? Then his flashlight caught her face fully, and Samuel's world stopped spinning. The bone structure, the distinctive cheekbones, the small scar above her left eyebrow. It couldn't be, but it was. "Oh my God," he whispered, his hands beginning to shake for the first time in his career. "Dr. Hayes?" The woman didn't respond, but Samuel would have recognized that face anywhere. Older now, worn by time and hardship, but unmistakably the same face that had stared back at him from the dedication page of his medical textbook. The same face that had appeared in the documentary he had watched as a teenager, the one that made him decide to become a cardiac surgeon. Margaret Hayes, the pioneer, the legend, the woman who had revolutionized cardiac surgery techniques in the early 90s before vanishing from the medical world without explanation. Her photograph had been in every medical journal. Her techniques were still being taught in every surgical program, and she was dying on a sidewalk in the rain like she was nobody. "No!" Samuel's voice turned fierce as he scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, as if life had been slowly consuming her from the inside. "You don't get to die like this. Not you. Not after everything you've done. Not after you saved my career before it even started." He carried her to his car, laying her across the back seat as gently as if she were made of glass while barking orders into his phone. "This is Dr. Samuel Peterson from Memorial Hospital. Critical cardiac arrest patient. 5 minutes out. Clear trauma bay 1 and get cardiology ready. Now." As he drove through the rain, Samuel kept talking to the unconscious woman. "Do you know who you are to me, Dr. Hayes? I became a surgeon because of you. When I was 16 and my mother was dying, I read about your first pediatric heart transplant. You gave me hope." Margaret's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. "My mother died anyway," Samuel continued, his voice cracking. "But because of you, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be like you. I wanted to save people the way you saved them." The hospital loomed ahead, emergency lights cutting through the storm. Samuel carried Margaret through the automatic doors, her head resting against his shoulder. "Trauma Bay 1, move!" Nurses materialized with a gurney. Dr. Patricia Chen, head of cardiology, took one look at the patient and froze. "Samuel, is that—" "Yes, full cardiac panel. Echo, EKG, blood gases. She's in V-fib." The team moved like a choreographed dance. Monitors beeped to life. IVs snaked into Margaret's arms. Patricia's hands flew over the equipment. "She's coding!" a nurse shouted. Clear! Samuel grabbed the defibrillator paddles. The shock lifted Margaret's frail body off the table. The flat line mocked them. Again! Clear! Another shock. Come on, come on, come on. You survived 40 years in operating rooms. You don't get to die now. The monitor jumped. A heartbeat. Then another. We've got sinus rhythm, Patricia breathed. Samuel, that was not done yet. Samuel studied the monitors with laser focus. Look at her arterial pressure. She's had multiple minor infarctions. This wasn't sudden. Her heart's been failing for weeks. Clear! The defibrillator shocked Margaret's body, and Samuel watched the monitors with eyes that refused to blink. Come on, come on, come on. The flat line suddenly jumped, forming peaks and valleys that meant life. We've got sinus rhythm, Patricia breathed out in relief. Samuel, that was incredible. But Samuel wasn't celebrating yet. He was studying Margaret's chart with an intensity that bordered on obsession, seeing things that others missed. Look at her medical history. He pointed to the screen. See these markers? She has advanced arthritis in her hands. Severe. But look at the pattern. It's concentrated in the exact muscles used for microsurgery. Patricia leaned closer, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. You're saying she was a surgeon? Not just a surgeon. Samuel's voice filled with reverence. Dr. Margaret Hayes. She wrote the textbook on pediatric cardiac surgery. Won the Henderson Award in 1993. Performed the first infant heart transplant in this state. A resident's eyes widened. The Hayes technique? But the textbook said she died. Disappeared, Samuel corrected. Most brilliant surgeon in the country, then gone. I've wondered 15 years what happened. Patricia pulled up archives. Last publication 1994, last address Manhattan, earning $500,000 annually. Then silence. And now she's dying on a street with no one, Samuel whispered. And now she's a Jane Doe found on a sidewalk. Samuel's voice turned bitter. How does someone go from saving the world to dying alone in the rain? One of the nurses spoke up softly. Doctor, when we cut away her clothes, we found this. She held up a worn wallet. Inside was a driver's license, a social security card, and a single photograph. 3 children, smiling at the camera, maybe 20 years old. Samuel took the photo carefully, studying the faces. Her children? Must be, the nurse said. There's nothing else. No credit cards, no medical insurance card, no emergency contacts. Run her social security number, Samuel ordered. Find out where she lives. Find her family. Patricia pulled him aside as the team continued working to stabilize Margaret. Samuel, you're getting too emotionally involved. You need to step back and let someone else handle this case. No, Samuel's voice was absolute. This woman is the reason I'm standing in this hospital right now. She's the reason I can save lives. I'm not walking away. Patricia studied her colleague's face and saw something there that made her nod slowly. Fine, but you follow protocol. No special treatment just because she's famous. She's not getting special treatment because she's famous, Samuel corrected. She's getting the treatment she deserves because she spent her career giving everyone else that same level of care. As Margaret was moved to the ICU, Samuel pulled up her social security records and felt his heart sink. The address listed was in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of place that required money to live in. But something didn't add up. Run a financial check, he told the hospital's social worker. I need to know her situation. The results came back an hour later, and they painted a picture that made Samuel's blood run cold. Margaret Hayes had no assets, no savings account, no retirement fund. Her only income was a small social security check that had been delayed for 3 months due to administrative errors. The address on file was a house owned by someone named Rachel Morrison. Rachel Morrison, Samuel muttered, pulling up property records. Daughter? Samuel found Rachel Morrison's number. His hands shook dialing. 4 rings. Yes? Do you know what time it is? Dr. Samuel Peterson Memorial Hospital. Margaret Hayes. Silence. Then, what about her? Your mother was found unconscious. Massive cardiac event. Critical condition. Oh, too long a pause. I don't know what you expect me to do. Come to the hospital. Your mother is dying. We're not responsible for her. She made her choices. Her choices? Collapsing on a sidewalk? Check with social services. Don't call again. Click. Look, doctor, I don't know what my mother told you, but we're not responsible for her anymore. She's an adult. She made her choices. Her choices? Samuel couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. What choices did she make that resulted in her collapsing on a street in the rain? That's none of your business. Rachel's voice turned defensive. If she needs medical care, there are programs for indigent patients. We can't help her financially. I'm not asking for money, Samuel said through gritted teeth. I'm telling you that your mother is dying and she's alone. Then she's alone by her own choices. Goodbye, doctor. The line went dead. Samuel stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone like it had transformed into something poisonous. Then he did something he had never done before in his career. He threw the phone against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces. Samuel stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to dead air. Then he did something he'd never done in his entire career. He hurled the phone against the wall. It shattered into pieces that scattered across the floor like his composure. Patricia appeared instantly. What happened? Her daughter. Samuel's voice shook with fury. She refused to come. Said her mother made her own choices and to check with social services for indigent patients. Then she hung up on me. There might be history you don't know about. I don't care. Samuel's shout echoed down the corridor. I don't care if they fought every day for 30 years. You don't abandon your mother when she's dying alone in a hospital. You just don't. He stormed back to Margaret's ICU room, his rage shifting to something deeper, more painful. Through the glass, he could see her lying so still, so small in that bed. Machines breathing for her. Monitors tracking every weakening heartbeat. He sat down hard in the chair beside her bed, and for the first time since medical school, Samuel Peterson allowed himself to cry. After composing himself, Samuel took Margaret's twisted, arthritic hand. These fingers had once moved with precision to repair infant hearts, had written 47 groundbreaking papers. Now they couldn't hold a cup steadily. What happened to you? He whispered. Margaret's eyes fluttered open, confused, struggling to focus. Then they found Samuel's face. Where? Memorial Hospital. You collapsed. You had a heart attack. But you're safe now. Margaret's eyes took in the monitors, the IVs, the sterile walls, then closed. A tear slid down her cheek. Not relief. Shame. She was ashamed to be alive after being thrown away. Dr. Hayes. Samuel took her hand firmly. I know who you are. I know what you accomplished. You saved my mother's life, not directly, but because of your work. She lived 3 years longer than predicted. 3 years I got because you were brave enough to try the impossible. Margaret's hand tightened slightly around his. Weak, but there. Samuel made a vow then. He would find out what happened. He would discover why the most brilliant surgeon of her generation ended up dying on a street, and he would ensure whoever was responsible understood exactly who they discarded. Outside, rain pounded the windows. 3 blocks away, Rachel kept seeing her mother's face. Thomas kept hearing, I love you. Sarah wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake, but none picked up the phone. None came to check. None knew their mother lived, because a stranger valued her more than they did. None knew that by morning, 30 years of secrets would surface like bodies from deep water. Margaret breathed steadily, her damaged heart beating on. Deep in her consciousness, memories stirred. Operating rooms, tiny infants she'd repaired, awards that meant nothing, and 3 babies crying while she worked double shifts. The choice that cost her everything. The sacrifice her children never knew. The truth that would destroy them. Morning light filtered through hospital windows. Samuel had spent the entire night beside Margaret's bed, watching monitors beep their steady rhythm, and wrestling with consuming rage. Every time he looked at her face, peaceful in medicated sleep, he saw the woman from the textbook dedication page, the legend whose own children had discarded her like trash. His phone buzzed. Patricia, check the news, now. Samuel pulled up the local news website. His breath caught. The headline screamed, Legendary surgeon found dying on street. Where has Dr. Margaret Hayes been for 30 years? Someone had leaked it. Within hours, the story exploded across medical journals, news outlets, and social media. Margaret's photograph from her glory days, young, brilliant, appeared next to a grainy image of paramedics loading someone into an ambulance. The article detailed her accomplishments, her disappearance, her critical condition. But the final paragraph made Samuel's hands shake. Sources indicate Dr. Hayes was found 3 blocks from a residence owned by her daughter, Rachel Morrison. The family has declined comment. Questions remain. How did one of America's most brilliant surgeons end up abandoned and alone? His phone exploded with calls, news outlets, medical journals, former colleagues wanting to know if she was really alive. Samuel ignored them all except one, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, who'd trained under Margaret. Samuel? Is it really her? Yes. Oh my God. A sob. I've been searching 30 years. After she vanished, I tried everything. Investigators, missing persons, checking every hospital. Like she'd been erased. What was she like? Brilliant. Absolutely fierce with patience. But the kindest person I've known. She treated everyone with respect. When my premature daughter had a heart defect, Margaret operated 11 hours straight. Refused to charge us, said saving babies was what she was put on earth to do. Why did she leave? Nobody knows. Some said breakdown, others scandal. But those who knew her never believed it. Margaret wasn't running from something. She was running to something. After hanging up, Samuel returned to find Margaret awake, staring at the ceiling with eyes that held an ocean of sorrow. Dr. Hayes, he approached gently. How are you feeling? Like I should have died, she whispered. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Margaret turned her head slowly to look at him. You know who I am, don't you? Yes. Then you know I threw it all away. Her voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it more heartbreaking. Everything I built, everything I accomplished, gone. For what? Samuel pulled a chair close. What made you walk away from all of that? Margaret's eyes drifted to the window. I had a choice to make, career or family. I chose family. And now, her voice cracked, now they've chosen to throw me away. Tell me what happened. For a long moment, Margaret said nothing. Then, as if a dam had broken, the words spilled out. My husband David died suddenly. Heart attack at 35, right in front of me. I tried to save him, used every technique but couldn't. I was finishing my fellowship at Columbia. Rachel was 5. I was pregnant with Thomas. No savings. David's startup had failed. No insurance. Just 3 children needing their mother, and a career demanding 80-hour weeks. Samuel listened, his heart breaking. I tried both for a while. Worked nights, hired babysitters I couldn't afford. Rachel started acting out, failing classes, fighting at school. Thomas developed severe anxiety, couldn't sleep unless I was in the room. When Sarah was born, I almost made a fatal error during surgery because I hadn't slept in 40 hours. My hands shook. The attending had to take over. Margaret's fingers clenched the bedsheet. That night, holding Sarah in the hospital parking lot, I realized I had to choose. World's best cardiac surgeon and absent mother whose children were suffering. Or present for my children and give up everything. So you disappeared. Sold everything. Medical equipment, research notes, even my awards. Melted them for gold. Moved 3 states away, changed my name, became a cleaning lady. 3 jobs, sometimes 4. But I was there when Rachel got her first period. When Thomas woke screaming from nightmares. For Sarah's first words, first steps, first day of school. Everything that actually mattered. Did they know? Samuel asked. Did your children know who you'd been? Margaret shook her head. I told them their father died and left us nothing. Which was true. I told them I'd been a nurse, which wasn't entirely a lie. I'd trained as one before medical school. I never mentioned the awards, the surgeries, the acclaim. What good would it have done? It would only make them feel guilty. You sacrificed your entire career for them. I sacrificed everything for them, Margaret corrected. And I would do it again. Because I got to see them grow up. I got to bandage their scraped knees and help with homework and teach them to cook. I got to be their mother, not just someone who donated DNA and paid for nannies. But they don't appreciate it. Margaret's laugh was bitter. How could they? They don't know. To them, I'm just the cleaning lady who became a burden. They never saw the woman I was before. They only see the broken-down woman I am now. Samuel felt tears burning his eyes. Your arthritis? That's why you stopped the night work at the clinic? You're a good detective. Margaret smiled sadly. Yes, 7 years ago, my hands finally gave out completely. The clinic work was all I had left of my old life. Performing simple procedures, teaching residents. When that ended, I had nothing left but my children. And now I don't even have them. Before Samuel could respond, shouting erupted in the hallway outside. Raised voices demanding entry, security trying to maintain order. Then the door burst open violently, and 3 people stormed into the room. 2 women and a man, all with faces twisted in fury, and something else that looked dangerously close to panic. Fear. "You had no right." Rachel's voice shook as she pointed an accusing finger at Samuel. "No right whatsoever to talk to the press about our private family business. I didn't. Our phones won't stop ringing. There are reporters camped outside our house. People on social media calling us monsters, saying we should be arrested." Thomas looked like he might be sick, his face pale and clammy. "Do you have any idea what you've done to our lives?" Sarah hung back near the door, her eyes fixed on her mother in the hospital bed, with an expression Samuel couldn't quite read. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Horror? Dawning understanding? He couldn't tell. "Get out," Samuel said quietly but with steel in his voice. "This is our mother," Rachel shrieked, her voice breaking. "You can't keep us from seeing her." "Your mother?" Samuel's voice turned to ice that could have frozen flames. "Is that what she is to you? Because yesterday when I called you, when I told you she was dying, you told me to check with social services for indigent patients. Yesterday you hung up on me and told me never to call again. Now you're here because you're embarrassed? Because the entire world knows exactly what you did? You don't understand what we've been through." Thomas started, but his voice lacked conviction. "I understand perfectly." Samuel stepped between them and Margaret's bed like a guardian standing between his charge and danger. "I understand that this woman gave up a career worth millions of dollars to raise you 3. I understand that she worked 3, sometimes 4 jobs while you were growing up, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors. And I understand that when she needed you most, when she was at her most vulnerable, you threw her into the street like she was garbage to be taken to the curb. She was living off us!" Rachel's voice cracked with desperation. "We couldn't afford to keep supporting her forever. She paid for that house." Samuel pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen to show them property records he'd spent half the night pulling up. The down payment came from her life savings 30 years ago. The mortgage payments for the first 15 years, every single one, came from her paychecks. You 3 have been living in a house she bought with money she earned, eating food she provided for. Using resources, she sacrificed everything to give you. Samuel pulled up Margaret's Wikipedia page, articles, journals, awards, innovations, lives saved. The woman they'd called worthless had once been priceless. "No," Sarah breathed. "That's not. Look at her hands." Samuel pointed to Margaret's twisted fingers. That pattern from decades of microsurgery. Those wrist scars, radiation exposure in surgical suites. That forearm burn, from a surgical light. Your mother has a surgeon's hands. You never noticed. Margaret had remained silent, eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. "Mom?" Sarah stepped forward. "Is this true?" Margaret opened her eyes. The pain could have shattered diamonds. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't want you to feel obligated. I didn't want pity or gratitude or guilt. I just wanted you to love me, just as a mother. You let us think." Rachel's voice broke. "All those years we thought you were just a cleaning lady. We were embarrassed when friends had mothers who were doctors, and you were scrubbing their toilets. Yes, I knew what you thought. I heard you apologize for me. I saw you cringe at school events in my work uniform. I knew. But you could have told us." Thomas looked ready to cry. "And then what? Then you'd have spent childhood feeling guilty. You'd have felt responsible for my sacrifice. That's not childhood. That's a prison. So you suffered in silence?" Sarah sank into a chair. "I didn't suffer. I got to raise my children. Be there for every important moment. That wasn't suffering. That was the greatest privilege of my life." The room fell silent, except for monitor beeps. "Until we threw you out," Rachel whispered. "What have we done? You did what you thought was right. You saw a burden and removed it." "We should have known," Sarah cried openly. "Should have noticed your hands, questioned your medical knowledge. Should have looked at you, really looked, and seen who you were. But you didn't, and now you do." And nothing changes. I'm still dying. You're still strangers. The life I gave up is gone forever. Mom, Thomas started. Please leave. I'm very tired. Mom, we're sorry. I don't want apologies. I want my children back. But they're gone. If they ever existed. Rachel fled. Thomas followed. Sarah lingered, staring with horror and dawning understanding. I remember, Sarah whispered. When I was 6, I cut my hand. You knew exactly what to do. Stopped bleeding, assessed nerve damage, checked tendons. I thought you were just good in emergencies, but you were using surgical training. Margaret said nothing. How many other moments? Sarah's voice shook. Too many to count. Now please go. Sarah paused at the door. I'm so sorry we didn't see you. After they left, Margaret turned to the wall and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sounds tearing her apart. Samuel stood there, helpless, watching a legend break into pieces. Outside, the media circus was just beginning. News vans lined the hospital parking lot. Medical colleagues from across the country were booking flights. The story was going viral. The brilliant surgeon who vanished, the children who never knew, the sacrifice that went unrecognized for 30 years. But in that quiet hospital room, none of it mattered, because Margaret Hayes had given up everything for love, and love had thrown her away without even knowing what it was discarding. And now that the truth was out, the only question remained. Was it too late to fix what had been broken? Or had some wounds gone too deep to ever heal? Rachel sat in her car outside the hospital, hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She couldn't go home, couldn't face her husband's questions or her children's eyes. Her world had shattered. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Reporters demanding statements, friends asking if it was true, strangers calling her a monster. Maybe they were right. With shaking hands, Rachel searched Dr. Margaret Hayes, cardiac surgeon. The results exploded like accusations. Articles, medical journals, award ceremonies, photographs of a woman Rachel barely recognized. Young, vibrant, brilliant. Her mother in a white coat, holding surgical instruments, standing beside tiny infants she'd saved. Rachel clicked on a 1992 news segment about the first pediatric heart transplant in the state. Her mother, 30 years younger, explained the procedure with breathtaking passion. When you're working with a heart the size of a walnut, there's no margin for error. Every movement matters. Every decision means life or death. The reporter asked what drove her. Her mother smiled. I have a daughter at home, Rachel. She's 5 in my entire world. Every child I save, I imagine, is someone's Rachel. Someone's precious baby who deserves to grow up. That's what drives me every day. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. She clicked another article from 1993, the prestigious Henderson Award announcement for developing a revolutionary technique that reduced infant cardiac surgery mortality by 40%. Her mother had been at the peak of her career. Dr. Hayes could not be reached for comment, the article concluded. Colleagues report she left the hospital suddenly last month, citing urgent family obligations. Family obligations. That was Rachel. That was Thomas, brand new and helpless. That was their mother making an impossible choice and choosing them over worldwide glory. Rachel scrolled further, finding a forum post from 2005 on a medical discussion board. Does anyone know what happened to Dr. Margaret Hayes? She was the most gifted surgeon I've ever seen in 30 years of practice. She just vanished without explanation. She operated on my sister when no one else would take the case, didn't charge us a single penny. She literally saved my sister's life. Where is she now? Does anyone have any information? The responses were all heartbreakingly similar. No idea where she went. I've wondered the same thing for years. Such a devastating loss to medicine. Her mother hadn't just been good at her job. She'd been a legend, a pioneer, a genius. And she'd thrown it all away for children who hadn't even noticed what she'd sacrificed. For children who'd grown up embarrassed by her work uniform and calloused hands. For children who'd called her a burden and thrown her into the rain. Her phone rang, shattering the silence. Thomas. Rachel. His voice was thick with tears he wasn't even trying to hide. Did you see the articles? Yes. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. There's one from her medical school. She graduated top of her entire class. His voice cracked completely. They quoted her graduation speech. She said, Medicine is the art of fighting death with love. Every patient we save is a victory not just for science, but for humanity's refusal to give up on each other. Rachel closed her eyes against the overwhelming pain. Thomas, what have we done? I don't know. He was openly crying now, not even ashamed. God help me. I don't know. But we have to fix it. Somehow we have to fix this before it's too late. Inside the hospital, Sarah stood frozen in the hallway outside their mother's room, trapped in the moment where everything she'd believed had turned out to be a lie. Doctor, Peterson found her slumped against the wall, tears streaming down her face. She never told us, Sarah whispered. All these years. Why would she hide who she really was? Samuel studied her carefully. She seemed genuinely shattered. Because she loved you more than she loved herself. More than her career. More than anything. That's not right. Parents are supposed to have their own lives. Their own dreams. She erased herself for us. She transformed herself. She chose saving 3 children she loved over hundreds she'd never know. But we didn't need saving. We needed a mother who was happy, fulfilled. Did she seem unhappy? Growing up? Sarah stopped. The truth was, her mother had always seemed content. Tired, yes. Exhausted often. But there had been something in her eyes when she looked at them. Something like joy. She used to sing while she cooked. Even after 3 jobs, hands bleeding from chemicals, she'd sing these beautiful old songs. I thought she was just simple, that she didn't know there was more to life. Sarah's voice broke, but she knew exactly what she'd given up, and she sang anyway. She chose joy anyway. Samuel felt his throat tighten. Your mother had a patient. A little girl named Emma, born with half a heart. Everyone said she wouldn't survive. Your mother operated for 14 hours straight to reconstruct the missing chambers with techniques she invented during surgery. Emma lived. She's 25 now, married with a baby coming. She called today sobbing, said Dr. Hayes gave her life twice, once on the table, and again when she refused to charge Emma's bankrupt parents. How many lives did she save? Hundreds. In her peak years, over 200 successful surgeries. The mortality rate for her procedures was cut in half. Half, Sarah. Think how many children are alive because of your mother. Sarah slid down the wall, and she walked away. For us. For 3 kids who called her a burden. She didn't see it as walking away. She saw it as walking towards something infinitely more important. How can you know? She told me. When I asked if she regretted her choice, she said the only thing she regretted was not being able to do both, not for herself, but because children she could have saved died waiting. That guilt haunted her 30 years. But every time it overwhelmed her, she'd look at you 3 and remember that some children need their mother more than the world needs another surgeon. Stop, please. I can't bear it. Do you know what she did 7 years ago when arthritis ended her clinic work? What clinic? She'd worked at a free clinic 3 nights a week for years, treating low-income patients. Basic procedures. Nothing like the complex surgeries she used to do, but still helping people, still making a difference. When her hands got too damaged to even hold a needle steadily anymore, she asked the clinic director if there was anything else she could do to help. They needed someone to clean the examination rooms. So she scrubbed toilets and mopped floors at a medical clinic where she'd once treated patients. Because even though she couldn't practice medicine anymore, she couldn't completely walk away from helping people. Sarah sobbed, her whole body shaking with the weight of understanding. How do you know all this? The clinic director called this morning. She was devastated. She said your mother was the kindest, most humble person she'd met in 40 years of running that clinic. That sometimes late at night she'd find her in the supply closet crying, and when she'd ask what was wrong, your mother would always say she was just tired. But the director knew the truth. She knew your mother was mourning the life she'd given up, grieving for all the children she couldn't save anymore. I want to see her, Sarah said suddenly, struggling to stand. I need to talk to her. I need to apologize, to tell her. She doesn't want to see you, Samuel said bluntly. Any of you. She told the nurses explicitly to keep you out. But I need to tell her I'm sorry. I need to make her understand. What? That you're sorry? That you didn't know? Samuel's voice turned hard. She doesn't want your apologies, Sarah. She wants her children back. The children she sacrificed everything for. But those children are gone, aren't they? You 3 grew up to be strangers who saw her as a burden. And now that you know the truth, you want forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't something you can just take. It has to be earned through actions, not words. Then tell me how. Sarah grabbed his arm desperately. Tell me how to earn it. I'll do anything, anything at all. I don't know, Samuel admitted, his voice softening with compassion. I honestly don't know if this can be fixed. The damage you three did, it goes so deep, Sarah. You didn't just throw her out of your house. You threw her out of your hearts. You told her she was worthless when she'd given you everything she had to give. That kind of wound doesn't heal with apologies. It doesn't heal with tears. Sarah sank back against the wall, her face crumpling with despair. Then we've killed her. Not her body, but her spirit. We've destroyed the part of her that believed love was worth the sacrifice. Before Samuel could respond, an alarm blared from Margaret's room. Nurses rushed past, and Samuel sprinted through the door to find Margaret convulsing, monitors screaming warnings. She's in V-fib. Get the crash cart. Samuel was at her side instantly. Margaret, stay with me. Don't you dare leave now. The defibrillator charged. Clear. Margaret's body arched from the shock. The monitor stayed flat. Again! Clear! Shock after shock. The room filled with the smell of ozone and fear. The line stayed flat. Outside, Sarah heard the chaos and pressed against the wall, listening to desperate shouts, frantic beeping, the sound of her mother dying feet away. In that crystalline moment of terror, Sarah understood. She'd been given a second chance to really know her mother, to see past the facade to the hero underneath. But second chances don't last forever. Sometimes they end with a flat line. Please, Sarah whispered. Don't take her yet. Not before I can tell her I see her now. I finally see her. Inside, Samuel performed chest compressions with desperate violence. Don't give up, Dr. Hayes. You survived 30 years of impossible sacrifice. You survived giving up everything. You survived raising 3 children alone. You survived watching your hands destroy themselves. You don't get to die now. Not when your children have finally started to understand. He didn't know if she could hear him, but he kept talking, kept begging, kept fighting for a woman who'd spent her life fighting for others and never asked anyone to fight for her. Your children need you, not the cleaning lady they thought you were, not the burden they tried to throw away. They need the woman you really are, the legend, the mother who loved them so much she erased herself from history for them. The monitor stayed flat. Nurses exchanged knowing glances. One reached for the clock, ready to call time of death. No, Samuel snarled. Charge again. Maximum voltage. Doctor, we've been at this 8 minutes. The protocols. I don't care about protocols. Charge it. The machine whined, powering up to maximum. Samuel placed the paddles, whispered a prayer, and shocked with everything modern medicine could deliver. For an eternal, agonizing moment. Nothing. The universe held its breath. Then a single, tentative beep. Then another, stronger. Then a rhythm that looked like hope. We've got sinus rhythm, a nurse breathed. She's back. Samuel nearly collapsed with relief. He looked at Margaret's face and saw a small, precise surgical scar on her temple he hadn't noticed before. Get me her complete medical history. Every scan, every report. There's something we're missing. Outside, Sarah slid down the wall, crying with overwhelming relief. Her mother was alive. They still had time. The question burning in her mind, did they have enough time to earn back what they'd thrown away? Or would Margaret's damaged heart, damaged by more than disease, finally give out before her children could show her they'd learned to see? 3 days passed in a blur of guilt and desperate searching for redemption. 3 days during which Margaret remained unconscious. 3 days during which Rachel, Thomas, and Sarah transformed from strangers who had discarded their mother into people desperately trying to piece together the woman they'd never known. Samuel had barely left Margaret's bedside. He'd pulled every medical record from her past. What he'd discovered left him with heartbreak so profound it physically hurt. The scar on Margaret's temple was from a craniotomy, brain surgery performed 30 years ago to remove a benign but growing tumor. But here was the devastating part. Margaret had performed preliminary diagnostic work on herself. The attending surgeon's notes from 1994 were reverent. Dr. Hayes displayed remarkable composure discussing her own mortality. She made me promise that if complications arose, I would prioritize her survival over preserving her surgical abilities. She said, "My children need a mother who's alive, not a surgeon who's dead." Margaret had literally chosen her children over her surgical career, even facing death. The tumor pressed on the part of her brain controlling fine motor skills. There was significant risk the surgery would end her ability to perform microsurgery. She'd known that. She'd calculated the odds, and she'd chosen life with her children over everything. The surgery left her with subtle tremors that made complex surgery impossible. She'd walked away because her body had betrayed her, and she'd chosen to see it as a gift rather than a curse, a gift of time with her children. The door opened. Rachel, Thomas, and Sarah entered together, looking like they hadn't slept in days. Their eyes were red, clothes wrinkled, faces etched with raw grief. "How is she?" Rachel's voice was hoarse. "Stable. Her heart is holding, but she hasn't woken up." "We need to tell you something." Thomas stepped forward, hands shaking. "We've been doing research about Mom. We haven't stopped, haven't slept." "We found her colleagues," Sarah added. "Called every doctor in her old publications. They all said the same thing, that she was the most brilliant surgeon they'd ever worked with, that she could have been world famous. She turned down positions at Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, Stanford. We found letters." Thomas pulled out his phone. "Old letters from our attic, offers, dozens. Look, Switzerland offering $200,000 for a single consultation. And journals." Sarah's voice trembled. "She kept journals for each of us, every single night, for 30 years. Rachel opened a worn leather journal with shaking hands and read aloud, her voice breaking with every word. "Rachel turned 6 today. She wanted a birthday party with all her friends from school, but we can't afford it. I told her we'd have a special day, just the two of us. We made cookies together, chocolate chip, her favorite, and she told me I was the best mom in the world. Her little hands were covered in dough, and her smile was brighter than any spotlight. She doesn't know that I turned down a position at Columbia today that would have paid me enough to give her 100 birthday parties, 1,000 presents. But seeing her smile covered in cookie dough, hearing her laugh, that was worth more than any salary. That was worth everything I gave up." The room fell into a profound silence, except for the steady beep of Margaret's monitors, marking each fragile heartbeat. Thomas cleared his throat, fighting back tears. "Mine says something similar. From when I was 8 years old. Thomas had another panic attack today during his school presentation. The school counselor suggested therapy, specialized treatment, but I can't afford it. So I'm learning everything I possibly can about childhood anxiety. Reading medical journals late at night when he's asleep, studying psychology texts, taking notes. If I can't give him professional help, I'll become the professional help he needs. Tonight I taught him a breathing technique I learned from a psychiatric journal. He fell asleep holding my hand, finally calm. This is why I gave up surgery. For moments like this. For being the person he needs when he's scared." Sarah was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face like rain. "Mine is even worse. Listen to this. Sarah asked me today why we're poor, why her friends have nice clothes and big houses and we don't. She asked if I failed at life, if that's why we live the way we do. I wanted to tell her that we could have all of that and more if I'd stayed in medicine. That I walked away from millions of dollars, from respect, from a career that would have made our name famous. But how do I explain that no amount of money is worth missing her childhood? How do I tell her that I chose her over everything the world considers success, and I'd make that choice 1,000 times again? How do I make her understand that she is my success?" Rachel closed the journal carefully, reverently, as if it were a sacred text. There are hundreds of entries like this. Hundreds. Every single day for 30 years, she wrote about choosing us, about not regretting it, about how watching us grow, being there for every moment, was the greatest privilege of her life. "We didn't just throw away our mother," Thomas whispered, and his voice was filled with a horror that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. "We threw away a woman who gave up everything, her career, her reputation, her health, her entire future, for children who couldn't even see her for who she was." Samuel felt tears burning. "She knew you couldn't see her. She chose that. She chose to be invisible if it meant you could grow up without guilt." "But we should have seen anyway," Sarah said fiercely. Her hands. "How did we not notice? How did we not see the scars, the longing when she watched medical shows? Because she didn't want you to, Samuel said gently. She wanted you to see a mother, not a martyr. Rachel took Margaret's hand. Mom, I don't know if you can hear me, but I see you now. I finally see you. Not the cleaning lady, not the burden. I see Dr. Margaret Hayes, who saved hundreds of lives. I see the mother who sacrificed everything so we could have childhoods free from guilt. I see the hero who chose us over glory. Thomas moved to the other side. I see you too, Mom, the woman who worked 3 jobs and never complained, who showed up to every school event in her work uniform. We were embarrassed by the woman who gave up millions to be there for us. And I see you most of all, Sarah whispered, because I'm the one you were holding when you decided to walk away forever. You looked at me, a newborn who couldn't even focus, and decided I was worth more than saving the world. How do we live with that? How do we carry the weight of knowing we destroyed the woman who gave us everything? You don't carry it as burden, Samuel said quietly. You honor it. You become worthy of what she gave. But how? Rachel asked desperately. By seeing others the way she saw you. By recognizing that every person has value beyond achievement. By understanding that love, real, sacrificial love, is the only thing that truly matters. A monitor beeped differently. Margaret's eyes were fluttering, opening slowly. Mom? Sarah breathed. Margaret's eyes focused gradually on her children. Something fragile flickered in her expression. Why are you here? Her voice was barely audible, damaged. Because we're sorry, Rachel said, tears streaming. Because we were wrong. Because we finally see who you are. You see a dying old woman. That changes nothing. No, Thomas said firmly. We see Dr. Margaret Hayes, pioneer in cardiac surgery, inventor of the Hayes technique, the woman who saved hundreds. We see our mother, Sarah added, who gave up everything for us, who loved us enough to become invisible. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You read the journals. Every word, Rachel confirmed. 30 years of choosing us. 30 years of not regretting it. I didn't want you to see it, Margaret whispered. I didn't want you to feel guilty. We know, but we should have seen anyway. Should have noticed you spoke fluent medical terminology. Should have looked at your hands and seen what they'd been. We should have seen you, Sarah said simply. Who you really were. Margaret closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. It changes everything, Rachel said fiercely. It changes us. We can't undo what we did. We can't erase those words. But we promise. We will spend the rest of our lives becoming people who deserved your sacrifice. We will see people, Thomas added, really see them. Not just what they appear to be, but who they truly are. And we'll tell your story, Sarah said, to remind others that the most valuable people in our lives are often the ones we take for granted. Margaret looked at each child in turn. Do you know what I regret most? That I couldn't be both, that I had to choose, that society made me pick between professional fulfillment and being present, that no one ever asked your father to make that choice, but I had to. That's not fair, Sarah whispered. No, it wasn't fair, but it was real, and I made my choice. And even now, even after everything, I would make it again, because you 3 were always worth it. Rachel let out a sob. How? How can you say that after what we did? Because love doesn't depend on the receiver being worthy, Margaret said softly. It depends on the giver being willing. And I was always willing to love you, no matter what. Sacred silence. Truth too heavy for words. Finally, Thomas spoke. Mom, will you forgive us? Margaret looked at him. There's nothing to forgive. You didn't know who I was. How could you treat me with respect when I hid my own worth? But we should have respected you anyway, Sarah insisted. Worth isn't something that has to be proven. Every person deserves dignity and love. Margaret smiled, a real smile. You learned that. You finally learned what I spent 30 years trying to teach through example. That success isn't measured in awards. That the truest measure of a life is how much love you give. We learned it too late, Rachel said. No. Margaret reached up and touched Rachel's face. You learned it exactly when you needed to. Because now you know both sides. What it's like to dismiss someone, and what it's like to be dismissed. That knowledge will make you kinder. Will you come home with us? Thomas asked, his voice trembling with hope and fear. Let us take care of you the way you took care of us. Let us show you we've changed. Margaret looked at her 3 children, her babies, now grown and finally grown up in the ways that truly mattered. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying the weight of forgiveness that changes everything. "Yes, I'll come home." And in that moment, something broken was mended, not fixed. Some things break too completely to ever be truly fixed, and the scars would always remain, but mended, held together by the fragile, fierce strength of love that had finally learned to see past surfaces, past assumptions, past the lies we tell ourselves about the people closest to us. As Rachel, Thomas, and Sarah embraced their mother carefully, mindful of her fragile condition, each of them silently making promises they intended to keep this time, Samuel slipped quietly out of the room. His work here was done. He'd saved the legendary surgeon who had inspired him to enter medicine in the first place. But more than that, he'd helped a family learn the most important lesson any family can learn, a truth that most people never discover until it's too late, that the people we love are not defined by their achievements or their accolades or what the world says they're worth. They're defined by the quiet, daily choices they make to put others before themselves, by the sacrifices they make that no one sees, by the love they give even when it's not recognized or returned. That worth is not something that needs to be proven with awards or money or status. It exists inherently in every person who chooses love over convenience, who chooses presence over prestige, who chooses family over fame. That the greatest tragedies in life aren't the big, dramatic losses we see coming from miles away. They're the everyday miracles we fail to notice until they're almost gone. The parent who works 3 jobs, the hands that once performed surgery now scrubbing floors, the brilliant mind content to help with homework instead of publishing groundbreaking research. Margaret Hayes had given up saving the world to save 3 children. She'd traded international recognition for bedtime stories, surgical theaters for kitchen tables, medical journals for parenting journals. And those 3 children had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all, that some people are treasures beyond price that we carry our whole lives without ever realizing we're rich beyond measure, until the day we almost lose them. And then, if we're lucky enough to get a second chance, we learn to see, really see, not just with our eyes that only catch surfaces, but with our hearts that can recognize true value when we finally stop looking for it in all the wrong places. And that seeing, that true deep recognition of another person's worth, independent of what they can do for us or what they've achieved, that is the greatest and purest form of love there is. The kind of love Margaret had shown her children every day for 30 years. The kind of love they would now spend the rest of their lives learning to return.